Hi, and thanks for joining me again. Trauma occurs when we experience something that our conscious awareness can't quite make sense of. It goes outside of our ability to rationalize or reason. When we experience trauma, our brain takes over and sends messages to the peripheral nervous system to initiate our hyperaroused state. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for hyperarousal, or our stress response. And when this happens, our body goes into fight, flight, or freeze, sometimes tend and befriend. When we're in a hyperaroused state, we aren't really responding, we're reacting to situations. And these reactions create loops or patterns. In yoga, we call these loops and patterns samskaras. And they lead us into patterns that might precipitate dis-ease in our experience. When we can begin to understand the process of trauma and how it is affecting our brain and our body, we can begin to back out of the experience and look at the whole of the experience through the lens of the observer. This gives us an opportunity to depolarize or desensitize our perception of the experience so that we can let go of any attachments we might have to those perceptions. When we experience trauma, the amygdala is activated. The amygdala is designed to keep us alive, and one of its functions is the function of fear or alerting the body that something is wrong. When this happens and we experience a traumatic event, these events get stored in the hippocampus. The hippocampus is responsible for storing our memories. And when we experience traumatic events and we store them as memories, anytime our body or mind, unconsciously or consciously, feels that we are going back into a similar experience, it will call upon the previous experience for a reaction. Now, this affects and impacts our behaviors long after the trauma has been experienced. In some cases, it can perpetuate an experience with trauma that causes a post-traumatic stress syndrome. When an individual is re-traumatized over and over again, they experience post-traumatic stress syndrome, or PTSD. Typically, when we experience trauma, we hold in our body based on that experience. If we have one traumatic experience, we might not hold in our body so substantially. But if we've experienced trauma over and over throughout our lifetime, we might develop some very ingrained holding patterns that prevent us from moving forward. These patterns might show up physically, intellectually, emotionally, or even spiritually. And so when we begin to understand that the body's unconscious reaction is what is causing these holding patterns or cycles of behavior, we can start to undo the doing. Yoga is an excellent tool for helping us to undo the doing. In fact, that is really what yoga does. Yoga means union, and our yoga practice helps us to be reunited with the truth of our being. We are divine beings in a human experience, and sometimes we forget. We think we're less than, insignificant or incomplete, disconnected, or that we require something to be whole. This is all just a misunderstanding, and traumatic events perpetuate these misunderstandings. We're going to look at how trauma is actually stored in the tissues of the body, but it all starts in the mind. My perception of the event gets stored in the hippocampus, and then anytime I'm activated, I re-experience the traumatic event that causes an activation of my nervous system and perpetuates the holding in the body. As we move through the course content, ask yourself if you've ever experienced a traumatic event. It doesn't have to be life-shattering. It might just be something that has stuck with you and something that influenced your belief system. Maybe touch into that event and check in with yourself. Did that event shape your behaviors or your patterns? Did that event shape the relationships that you have or the way that you react or respond to things? If you answered yes, then you might try using some of these tools to neutralize the polarity that your unconscious and conscious mind perceive your experience to be.